Good morning to our dear Professor Dr. Remedios Magnaye and our dear classmates. This morning, we are tasked to present to you about the analysis of economic growth of certain selected Asian countries. My name is Albert Brian Vidal, and my teammate is Maria Carmen Vidal. So, in this video, we are going to feature five economies and try to explain how they have grown. Before we proceed with discussing the experiences of five countries, which are China, Vietnam, Singapore, Indonesia, and Philippines, we will just give you a brief background of the ideologies concerning economic growth so that we will have an idea of how things have happened in these countries that we are going to talk about and what can be the possible explanations, how they have grown or how they have become stagnant for decades. Okay. So our discussion begins first with explaining the history of economic growth ideologies. Uh, Based on our research, we have found out that the earliest theories, not theories, but the ideologies about economic growth dates back during the classical economics era. In these times, persons such as Adam Smith in his theory of absolute advantage and David Ricardo in his theory of comparative advantage, they were the ones who were pushing the idea that economic growth is a matter of growing investments and productivity growth in a particular country. By that, they mean improvements in land, labor, and capital are the solution to empower and guarantee economic growth in particular in certain countries. Well, this is quite obvious because it was also during that time wherein the ideologies of colonialism and feudalism was really rampant. It was during that time wherein Great Britain was pushing East and West in putting countries under the Commonwealth rule. It was also during that time when several countries in Europe were heavily engaged in occupying and discovering new land resources. Spain was in this mix too. Portugal was in this mix as well. The United States, of course, and then in Asia, we have Japan and China, who had this same ideology during the 1800s. So this same idea has gone until the 1930s, and this was before the Second World War. Yeah, to be safe. During the 1930s, the world experienced the Great Depression, and wherein most of the nations all over the world suffered severely in terms of economics. And what people have realized is that it's no longer land, labor, and capital that can push them out of depression. There should be something else. This is the time when John Maynard Keynes and other neoclassical economists came with a solution, and they said that countries will never go out of the depression if they keep looking at the supply side of the equation, which is land, labor, and capital. Instead, Keynes and his cohorts proposed that it's the demand side of the equation that's going to push out economies out of recession and depression. By that, he meant to say demand side economics. That is the time where he proposed that GDP is through his expenditure approach to GDP, wherein he said that GDP is a function of consumption, investments, government spending, and net exports, wherein he really emphasized the role of heavy consumption to push people out, to push economies out of depression. It worked to a certain degree, and as a matter of fact, many people still believe in his point of view. That was until in 1957, wherein Solow made this theory, and his research was based on his study about the United States. In there, he found out that it was not really land, labor, or capital which was to be praised for the success of the US. Rather, there was one more element, and that was technology. If you have noticed, if we say something is made in America, it is something good. And that was the main ideology during the 1950s. Fordism, Taylorism, all of these ideologies came around during that time. And it's the same time when Solo made this theory that countries are going to grow if they are heavily engaged in improving technology and innovation. That is also the same ideology that Japan followed and Korea followed. South Korea, not the northern one. South Korea followed that model. Japan also followed that model, and of course, the United States was the um, main country that followed that model. Uh, in the 1980s, this is when the time wherein the term sustainable development was coined. Persons who championed this ideology of sustainable development with Spangenberg in his prism of sustainability when he said that economic growth has to go hand in hand with protection and preservation of resources. The concern during that time is that economies were growing so fast, industrialization was rampant all over the world, but all of that came at a cost, and that is environmental degradation. The concern was due to rapid development, the future will be sacrificed, and there has to be something to be done during that time. And in the 1980s, through the UN Conference of Environment and Development in Agenda 21, which was participated by 171 countries, I believe the Philippines also ratified this Agenda 21. Um, Sustainable development became a key component of economic growth ideologies for many nations. Okay, and then from 2001 until up to this day, many people still follow the ideology of Sana A. Martin. It's not actually something new that Sana A. Martin was proposed. Rather, it was like a combination of many ideologies from the past because he believes that physical and human capital is really important for economic growth. Douglas and Cobb also believe in that. I hope we can touch that later on. But so far we want to talk about what Sanai Martin believes. So physical and human capital is needed. Education is needed uh, for economic growth. By the way, education is also a factor during Solo's theory, and it's also the battle cry of Barack Obama during his term of presidency. Barack Obama believed so much in technology and innovation, and that was his economic formula to bring back United States into power, into like um, grand grand number one spot again. He believed that if America will become innovative again, will become technologically advanced, like several steps ahead of everyone, including their main rival China, then they will go back into power, like convincingly. But as we all know, it did not happen, and that's maybe the reason why the Democrats did not win again in the election and they lost to Donald Trump. Anyway, to cut the long story short, they believe that it was innovation and growing of the skills of human capital. Solo E. Martin also believes in that it can propel countries into growth. But more than that, Saleh A. Martin also believed that diversity of favorable institutions, the more institutions that there are that support economic growth, it will be better for it will be better for countries. This diversity of favorable institutions is one of the reasons why America is welcoming, and it's also the same with China. Actually, America, China, and not India, but Canada are all active in inviting experts from all over the world to come to their countries to work there and join them in growing their economies. Canada is very active with this. The United States is very active with this. If you would, for just for the information of all, many bright minds coming from Asia are all going to the United States or are being hired in the United States because they believe that they can contribute to the economy of the United States. As a matter of fact, you will notice it, many CEOs or many experts in America come from India, and because there are so many bright minds in India. Even the CEO of Google is from India, or from Pepsi, and so many other Amazon and other companies. They're all from India. So anyway, and then last is free movement of resources. Salai Martin also believes in the free movement of resources. Gone are the days when, during the classical economics, when they said that a country has to have an absolute advantage. It has to make what it can make and rely from others, what the others can do. Well, it's somewhat related to it, but right now it's more of like free movement of resources, liberalization of economies, opening up of economies. These are buzzwords from 2001. The main, um, like the main fuel for this liberalization of economies and opening of economies uh, is of course the World Trade Organization, joined in by more than 200 countries right now are a part of the WTO, and they are all into the free movement of resources. Free movement of resources also include not only imports and exports but also foreign direct investments. If you will notice, um, countries like Thailand, Singapore, the United States, China, all of these big economies that we all know right now are very involved in foreign direct investments. Not only not only welcoming foreign direct investments to go inside their countries, but also pushing private investments from their countries to other countries as foreign direct investments. It's just so sad to note that the Philippines is not really active with this. As a matter of fact, the Philippines is one of those countries who have the least foreign direct investments, and this is mainly because actually there are so many reasons, but the main reason is our constitution. Our constitution prevents the entry of foreign direct investments. As a matter of fact, what the constitution provides is that no foreign company can own more than 40% of a company in the Philippines, and that is like totally, uh, companies from other countries are like they totally disagree with that idea. Okay, so going forward, um, so that was like the history of economic growth. Now, what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to show you a video of the three main economic growth theories, which has somewhat consolidated all of these ideologies in the past and the theories that have been made about economic growth. So I made this video a couple of days ago, and I hope this going to give us a good idea of the main theories about economic growth. Okay, so there you have it. So there were like three main theories. Peter believes in innovation. Kuznets believes that it's natural tendency from a country to become poor in the short run, but because of government savings, and this government savings will be used to uh, make capital investments, roads, bridges, telecommunications, information technology, and all of that. Like what Vietnam did. Vietnam was very aggressive with this before. When I was there a decade ago, almost a decade ago, there was nothing in Vietnam, but there were no really that big those big investments. But they kept on creating roads, bridges. They kept on improving information technology, and actually, it was really part of the Communist Party's plan to bring their country into progress. And right now, they are threatening China to become the number one hub for manufacturing. They're already on the second stage of Cosnet's model. Um, and then lastly, we also have the look up Rostos. Rostos also have the same ideology. It's natural from countries to be poor in the short run, and eventually their growth will be exponential compared to other countries. Okay, so given all those theories, I will just show to you some of the things that we have also done as like a background idea or information about our report for this morning. I think what I'm going to show you first is um, a chart about a moving chart about that shows to us how Asian economies have grown. And in this video, you will see the movement of China, Indonesia, Singapore, Vietnam, Philippines. So I hope you will see this video and you can make some inferences from it later on. So, okay, there you go, classmates. So, right now we are from being number one in the 60s, we are now right now the fifth largest economy in Southeast Asia. Indonesia has been the biggest since the 1970s when they opened the economy. We will talk more about Indonesia's growth later on, but this is how it stands right now. And Vietnam is not a distant sixth. Singapore is just right above us, but comparing resources, geographical, geographically, and also like with natural resources and with population, I think we are far better with Singapore, but we are still in a very actually the Philippines has been regarded as a problematic state. I hope we can shed light to that later on in our report. Other details that are on this left side of our presentation will be explained later on as we go on with our presentation. But for now, I will talk more first about the Philippines and try to explain our economic growth or the lack thereof. Okay, so let's go to the Philippines. This is the latest report that we have researched. This comes from the World Bank itself. They said that the Philippines has increased urbanization. We have a growing middle class and a large and young population. Our economic dynamism is rooted under strong consumer demand, supported by a vibrant labor market and robust remittances. These are from our OFWs. And business activities are buoyant, with notable performance in the services sector, including business process outsourcing, real estate, finance, and insurance industries. I think this is the first thing that is sick about our country. Actually, all economists, uh, I don't know if I can be that bold to claim it, but many economists are saying that a country grows following the pattern of agriculture and then manufacturing and then services. We should be at the state right now a manufacturing driven economy, given the number of human capital that we have, given our logistical advantages. Still, the Philippines is a very it's strategically located. I mean, we are an archipelago and we should have very good ports like what Singapore or Indonesia have because we are surrounded by water. We should have very good connecting bridges inter islands. That's what we should have. But we can, and since we do not have it, we cannot grow our manufacturing sector. And we have totally lost our advantage for manufacturing to countries like Vietnam and Indonesia and not Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia. Of course, we have known about China before because of their cheap labor. But we could have taken that advantage before, and even Singapore, before this other countries have realized it that we're not doing anything. We were really the sick man of Asia, and it's actually annoying. I'm sorry if I sound so emphatic and annoyed right now, but because that's the truth. I'm really annoyed and I'm really disappointed with our country. We are so focusing on dead end sector services. The services industries are good for mature economies. If you will notice, like America, they're not growing their manufacturing sector anymore. Well, not right now because Donald Trump wants to bring back manufacturing in the U.S. because they want jobs, jobs, jobs. But the thing is, mature economies they use their money. They are not into manufacturing anymore. The UK is not doing that anymore. They're not really active in manufacturing anymore. They're active in the services sector, financial services, investment, technology. They are on that level already. They don't manufacture anymore. They ask other countries to manufacture for them. We are not yet on that state. We are on the state where we should be on the manufacturing side. We have a very young and buoyant labor force, there are so many underemployed and unemployed. They should be going to the manufacturing industries. But we don't have really an active manufacturing industries aside from the semiconductor, which again is another dead. I'm sorry, which is, although it generates income for us, that's not really delivering high value added for the country, because the semiconductors are going out of the country very cheap and then going back inside again to our country in the form of laptops, computers, which we buy more at a very expensive price. We should be a country that produces the laptops and computers and TVs. I mean, the consumer and electronics, not parts of this electronic gadgets, because they don't really bring that much. Actually, our OFW contributions are far bigger than the semiconductor contributions. And how is that? Wait, why is it like that? So anyway, we are going to continue on. Why are we still poor? Aside from corruption, this is like documented. This is well known. This is notorious in the Philippines. But aside from that, corruption being our main economic illness, one of the things that is being mentioned why the Philippines is poor until now is because we don't have any tremendous growth in living standards. I'll just explain it a bit. Living standards does not only mean to say the quality of living. It also means to say purchasing power parity. It also means to say our per capita income, our level of technology, access, the quality of health sector, the quality of education sector. All of those things factor in what we call as living standards. This is what research have found out. Um, the inference is that if your score is lower than 0.15 in the living standards, this is um, done by the World Bank. This is a World Bank study, and this is what they say. A study was done in 1997 to 2002, and it was said in that study that if your living standard score exceeds 0.15, uh, 0.15, they will belong later on, sooner not later, in the high living standard, in not in the far future, I'm sorry, in the high living standard, meaning you will be like Singapore material or South Korea material if your score is 0.15. But if your score is lower than 0.50, most likely you're going towards the low level steady states. These are the likes of Cambodia, Laos, all of those other countries. The score of the Philippines was from 0.17 in 1960. That was above 0.15. But in year 2000, we went to 0.13. Our living standards actually went, I don't know what happened, but instead of going forward, we went backward. Instead of increasing, we went into decreasing. So from 1960, we were 17, and then in the year 2000, we were 0.200. How fun is that? Okay, next. A relative living standard. This is how it looks like. See, this is what I was telling you. See, Hong Kong, from 0.18 in 1960, they become point eight in the year 2000. Korea was point 0.14. We were 0.17 during the same time. And they become 0.57. Thailand, from 0.07 to 0.19. Malaysia is from zero point 0.2 to zero point 0.4, and we are from 0.17 to 0.13, like what I have just said earlier. And this is actually something depressing and annoying at the same time. Why is it begs to be answered, why is our relative living standard like this? We will explain it. Number one, and this is documented by Easterly and Sa. Possible explanation is because of diffused and demographically widespread corruption. True. Uh, Thanks to our institutions, our government institutions, well, I'm blaming everyone for this. We have a very diffused, like from the barangay level down to the national level, down to the president's level. I'm not saying now because I hope I don't hurt any one of you because you have your own political beliefs. So let's just agree to disagree on some points. But I really like our president right now. Anyway, the point is this: from 1960s, we can blame it on Marcos, but we can also, from then on, it has become a part of our culture to be a corrupt culture. It dragged us literally down. But perhaps, so everybody knows about this. It's already common knowledge. So I think this is a value addition if I tell you the second explanation why we are poor. This is the Cobb-Douglas production function model. And what this model tells us is that output, GDP, we call it GDP, the common measure of economic growth is GDP. Uh, in economics, Y means income or output. So anyway, GDP, according to him, is a factor of C, which is total labor productivity, multiplied by labor, multiplied by capital. Okay, let's explain this determinants. Total factor productivity means technology. Technology exponentially grows the production of a particular country. For example, take a look at the agricultural sector of America. They're always food sufficient. They will never get hungry because of technology. Israel is another example. Because of technology in agriculture, Israel is a barren land. We have far better fertile soil in the Philippines than now what they have there in Israel. But they have used technology to their advantage. And even if other countries gang them up and cut their supply of food, they won't even nudge about it because internally they are self-sufficient. And what triggered their agricultural output sufficiency and productivity? It was technology. Until now, in our farmlands, what you will see is a man and a carabao pulling whatever it is that they're pulling for farming. We have so lagged behind agriculture and and any other technologies. When I was still in Vietnam, believe it or not, my friends, there are cities there that is internet that you can consider as a free Wi-Fi city. Like everywhere you go, you can connect to a Wi-Fi for free because that's part of the improvement that their government is doing. Now, so that's part, total factor productivity, multiplied by labor. Of course, the younger the population is, as long as they belong to the labor force, in our country that would be from 16 to 60. In other countries will be 18 to 60. Anyway, the number of laborers and their productivity, their contribution to output can increase further if their skills are improved. That's why there's an A here. A is the exponent for labor. And this exponent, of course, we know what exponents do. The bigger the exponent, the bigger the number will be. So labor output will become bigger, will multiply exponentially if the skills of the laborers are improved. Vietnam, for the good information of everyone, is very aggressive in sending their students abroad, financed by the government to study. And then later on, they will be coming back to Vietnam to help the government and to help the private or public sector develop. That's what they're actively doing. China is doing the same thing, sending thousands of Chinese students abroad, later on recalling them back to China to fish about what they have learned in the United States. Because of course that will develop the labor capability. Technology transfer and education exponentially grows the productivity of labor. And lastly is capital. Capital in this formula means infrastructure. So this can be soft infrastructure or network infrastructure. It can also be like physical infrastructures, bridges, roads, hospitals, commercial buildings, industrial estates. All of these things are what we call as capital. I have said a while ago how aggressive Vietnam was. in this. Until now, they're so aggressive in creating more roads. Up to the mountains, you will see very good wide roads, lighting facilities, electrical facilities. They were really good. I don't like how Marcos was before because, yeah, let's admit that he was corrupt. But then again, he was the only president who established so many infrastructure before. If it was not just the hatred of the Aquinos, we could have had our Bataan nuclear facility, which could have been a very big infrastructure that could have help us in our electricity problems. And if we have brought down the price of electricity, it could have welcomed a lot of investors. But because we don't have those facilities until now, we have lagged behind in capital formation. Um, one more annoying example that I'm going to give you is look at how our government before was spending its money. I mean, like, how many basketball courts was financed to you by Congressman Ek or Congressman whoever? Our past politicians, our past governments have been very active in producing things that are worthless. Worthless, really, like the creation of basketball courts for the youth, or the creation of a daycare center where no one goes. We have so many dummy projects, like literally dummy projects, bridges, bridges that are put. Oh my goodness, I don't, I know that you have heard of those stories, but all of these blunders that we have done in the past accumulates and has transformed to the demise, which is known as the Republic of the Philippines. Okay, so given that, let's move on further with the annoyance. Uh, this is our situation right now. With respect to labor skills, this is what the PSA, Philippine Statistics Authority, have said. 36% of firms consider the lack of pertinent skills as the main reason why they find it hard to fill their vacancies, their employment vacancies. Yes, many of our institutions, many universities have become diploma mills, and they're producing people who are worthless in the work environment. The World Bank Enterprise Survey even reported 10.1% of the private sector identified an inadequately educated workforce as a major constraint for growth in 2015, up to 7.8% in 2009. Yes. And then another research says that our behavioral skills, or at least the students' behavioral skills, such as managerial, leadership, interpersonal communication skills, are really that bad already. I just like to point out that many of us have already traveled outside of the Philippines, and we all notice that we still have the slight advantage with respect to English proficiency. But mind you, we are already losing it to other countries. We are not losing it yet, but we have the tendency to lose it to these other countries. So that's the last thread, or that will be the last nail in the coffin. If we lose that, we will lose the business process outsourcing industry. We will lose the call center industry if we lose this proficiency. So please, I hope we all tell everyone that we should not give up our English proficiency because other countries like Singapore, Korea, um, well, they're not a threat to us. But imagine if this Chinese speaking or Cambodian, Lao, Vietnam, they still have a long way to go, but they are getting there. And if we lose it to them, India will not beat us yet, but later on, India is the closest rival to us. But most of the call centers have moved out of India because of their, I think it's more of like pronunciation problems, the diction and everything. They don't have the, what do you call this? They don't have the, yeah, the accent. because they should get the Western accent, and they really cannot get that Western accent more than how the Filipinos get it as of now. But again, we don't know. We can, if there's one ability that the Philippines has, it's the ability to screw up things. So who knows? With respect to productive, I go first with productivity. The productivity, with respect to productivity or technology, the Philippines got a score of 5.5 and shared the 55th place with countries such as Colombia, Jordan, Kazakhstan, Serbia, and Sri Lanka. No offense meant to these countries, but we are far better than them. We should be far better than them. In the Philippines, we are the fourth most tech-ready economy. Of course, number one is Singapore, number two is Malaysia, number three is I think Thailand or Indonesia, and then us is fourth. And then um, this score is based from factors like access to internet, digital economy infrastructure, and openness to innovation. I guess we are open to innovation, but access to internet and digital economy infrastructure, I kind of doubt this research to be honest. Um, Next, last is capital formation. I have pointed this out earlier. I was telling that one reason why the Philippines has lagged behind is because of poor capital formation. Uh, Even right now, the clamor of the millennials, uh, well, I kind of pity them because they're mostly misinformed. They're mostly manipulated and exploited. You know, their ideals right now. I can even hear it even from my own nephews, even from my from the younger generation that they're complaining so much about the government, saying that this government has borrowed a lot of money. We are already neck deep in debt and everything and all that. Well, I just like to point out that well, it's inevitable. It's necessary. If we want to grow, we have to spend. And people might be saying, well, we should have relied on the savings of the government. And yes, we have been saving, and all of those savings have been depleted already by COVID 19. And luckily, we have saved, actually. We have saved. And and another thing is this: we cannot really because the in theory, if you can recall earlier, I was talking about business. The theory is that governments will be saving money, and the saving will be put into infrastructure. Yeah, that's good. But in the case of the Philippines, our savings went into one is corruption, but number two is went into public services. We are overpopulated. We are a democratic country, and the job of the government, unlike in communist and socialist countries, where there will be fair distribution of everything, at least that's what the theory is saying. But in our country, this money that we collected in the form of taxes has to go back to the people. It has to go back to education, has to go back to health, and all of these other public services. That's mandatory. That's the job of the government. But what happened to the Philippines? We are overpopulated and we don't have that much income. But still, at the end of the day, the government has to give this service. Otherwise, these politicians will lose in the next elections. That's why they are always hell bent in trying to get their pork barrels before, so that they can show that they're doing something for their people, even if it's just as stupid as creating a basketball court for the improvement of the youth, so they will not be dragged into illegal into vices and illegal drugs. Which is somewhat funny. So we don't have money to spend for all of this infrastructure. Where do you go next? Of course, you have to borrow money, either internally or outside. The government did not borrow internally because it will crowd out investment. The next option is supposed to be foreign direct investments. But how can there be foreign direct investments in the Philippines if the Constitution itself prevents foreign direct investments? What will be the last resort? Debt. Debt will be the last resort. But the thing is, right now, people are like having, the debt of the Philippines It's already 9 trillion. But little that they know that 6.4 trillion of that debt was on the Aquino administration, and this current administration's debt increased only by 2.6, around 2.6 trillion dollars, and that is because of our response to COVID-19. But then again, millennial wokes and other people do not really see it. Well, I'm not just saying this because I'm pro Duterte. I am pro Duterte, but uh, well, I have been monitoring our country for quite a long time, and for the record, I was pro Aquino before. That was before Mama Sapano, before all of his blunders came. But during the election period, I was pro Aquino, and then later on, when he stepped into the plate and ran the country, I don't even know if you can tell it like he ran the country. With I don't know. I cannot even point out one single thing that he did. And maybe some people will be pointing out that he was the one who initiated the four P's, to which to my mind is another stupid thing. We have learned that in many countries before. You don't give dole outs to people. Four P's is a form of a dole out. What is a dole out? A dole out is money that the government gives to the people, which is non-productive. Non-productive in the sense that they will not use it to grow themselves further. It means that they will just use it to buy things, their supplemental or for their supplements for their living needs. But that's a dead end investment. You cannot even call it an investment. You cannot even call it that's like something that will add to the consumption expenditure part of the GDP, because in the first place it's an expense of the government that was just passed on to that was given to this. And how many stories have you heard about people who were beneficiaries of 4Ps and that they use it to, for example, buy illegal drugs or use it for their vices like, going into gambling and all of those sorts of things. This is something stupid. And the 4Ps was only provided to save the political careers of these politicians. And what was the result? It could have been better if this 4 Ps was provided in the form of jobs. Work for it. If you are going to earn something, at least work for it. Do something productive for the country. But we are not doing it. Anyway, before my blood boils, I'll just show you the figures about uh, gross domestic capital formation as a share of GDP. Gross domestic capital formation forms part, this is comprised of local investments and foreign direct investments. The pink line that you see is the Philippines. This is the pink line. And look at the other countries look at their share of capital formation to GDP. This um, this is Thailand. This is Malaysia. Look at all of their investments for capital formation, for bridges, roads, information technology investments. They are spending big. But in the Philippines, we are spending big for the most stupid things before. Not now. I believe in the build program. People will hate it for it, but unless we have these things, the economy will not transform itself. It's impossible. We need these bridges because we are an archipelago. We need logistic support, and logistics in the Philippines is a pain in the neck because we have to cross oceans, we have to cross seas to bring something from point A to point B, something that can be done by bridges. But how many good bridges that we have? We are so fond of the San Juanico Bridge, which was done ages ago. And after that, what other bridges did we have? Did we have any bridges during the Aquino administration? GMA, during GMA time, she had this idea of roll on, roll off, which is again, oh my goodness, I cannot even fathom how stupid it is. Okay, anyway, I'm very sorry for my English and for my language. So this is how we look like. Another thing that I want to show you is this. Look at the intra-ASEAN investment by host country, meaning how much of the country's money goes out of its country to be invested in other countries. Look at India. I'm sorry, Indonesia. Indonesia, 2016 and 2017, has been investing out of their country to where? To Singapore, to Australia. And they're also beneficiaries. The biggest the biggest partner of Indonesia is actually Australia. And look at how big they are investing. The Philippines is only a hairline higher than Cambodia and not that far from Laos. Look at Singapore, look at Thailand, look at these other countries. And it should not come as a surprise anymore that we are this sick because our constitutional provision is sick. Our government policy makers. Well, I don't know. Not from the present. I believe that many politicians in the present are in the right frame of mind. But from the past, well, oh my goodness, I cannot even. I'm a Christian. I don't want to say bad things anymore. Okay, so continuing on, I hope that it does not come as a surprise right now. Why our beloved Philippines is like this? In closing, to the Philippines, not all is lost yet. We still have a very very good labor component of productivity. Our English proficiency is still good, and COVID-19 is an equalizer of nations. It will just boil down to us as a people. We should not have this crab mentality anymore because that's what we do. Another reason why we don't grow is because we keep on pulling each other down. Perfect example is every time that there is a government blunder, what is the call of the people? Impeach, pull down instead of supporting. I'm sorry, even the church sometimes is like that now. The only priest that I listen to right now is Father Jerry Olmos because he's very apolitical and his mind is pro God, not really politics. But anyway, this is where we are right now as a country. Disappointing as it is, there is still hope for the Philippines. But until we see like-minded people who see growth, who is not nearsighted, who is not short-sighted, and more of like future-oriented and more pragmatic, I hope we can find some other people in the government who will be that pragmatic and look at things like this. Otherwise, let's all file for immigration to Canada or New Zealand or Australia because the Philippines will be hopeless unless we change. So with that, I'm going to be pausing and passing the report to my partner. Thank you very much.